First question, Coach Brown, comes from Greg Hunter. Greg?
Greg, hey, be careful what you ask. Be careful what you ask for. Forget if I gave you the job. There's good and bad to that.
As long as I get the paycheck, that's I'll be okay.
That's the highlight.
Yep, exactly. Hey, Neal, you've seen guys that have made the NFL. You coached them. You've seen guys that maybe were surprised that didn't. So, what's it take to get to that level? Is it just simply talent?
Now you've got to be elite, and I always talk to our guys about you got to give them reasons to say yes, because it's a process of elimination. Scouts, college scouts working their way up through the front office in the NFL, they're looking for reasons to say no. And you cannot supply them any reasons to say no. You got to give them reasons to say yes. But talent's a piece of it. I think your production is a piece, character, and then what's your trajectory? How does your game translate to the National Football League where everybody's elite?
Our next question comes from John and Tony.
Hey, Coach, I know as somebody who evaluates players, there's a lot of things that goes into this. How much do you put into this as opposed to looking at game tape and looking at how guys react on the field? Where does this all shake with you as a talent evaluator?
Yeah, all I can do is tell you from high school. I haven't been at that level. I haven't done the job that the scouts are doing. I can tell you from our perspective and from doing, recruiting for, nearly 20 years now, is you look at numbers, but you don't look at them just as numbers. You're looking at comparisons. You want to be able to look at it apples to apples. So how we look at it here is at these combines, recruiting events that you get all the numbers from, you're kind of comparing guys within that camp or combine because they all had similar watches, and they were, whether it was handheld or electronic, whatever it is, they're all similar. It's hard to go from measuring numbers, okay, unless it's the same person doing it. It's hard to go from, okay, there's a camp in Miami compared to a camp in Orlando, or, if I'm making sense there. Now, NFL, you'd have to ask them, John. I think my assumption is that the tape still matters the most, but these pro days do have merit, or they wouldn't do them.
Just say, Coach, workout warriors can make you a lot of money.
They can, yeah. I think that, I think this day helps you. It could potentially hurt. I think a lot of it goes into the date has been set for a while. And when you finish your season, not just for our guys, but in general across college football, they know they're going to have their pro days some point during March or April. And so those guys are working, so I think for the scouts, and again, I'm assuming, okay, which is dangerous because I hadn't worn that. But my assumption is a big part of these pro days is how did you prepare for that day, for this opportunity?
Last thing for me, do you coach them up a little bit and say, hey, this is what they're looking for, or do you just let them go on their own? How do you approach that with your guys?
Yeah, we have open discussions. If there's questions that I'm getting from repeated teams, I'll share that with our players. I'll say, hey, this is a point that you need to understand. This is where they have questions about you. These are their concerns. Definitely share that. If there's something that's really positive, I definitely do that as well.
Carly Nevis.
Coach, you just alluded to the training. I know Darius and Tony were the only ones officially invited to the quote-unquote combine. How have both of them transformed their bodies since you last seen them? Because I know they've been in a training regimen.
Yeah. I think Darius, first of all, is probably leaner. He did really well. I think you will be able to see the numbers and stuff later. I thought he performed well today. Tony is and I don't know if he's probably maybe 5 pounds heavier. I don't know if he looks a whole lot different, but for the position he's playing, he doesn't necessarily need to. But I thought that his movements were really efficient today, and I think he helped himself.
Cody Nesper.
Hey, Neal, going off that, I was just wondering if anybody, surprised you today, or if any of the numbers stood out to you just from, the last time you saw all these guys in November or December or whenever it was.
Yeah. Mike Brown and Kyle Poland have been here training the whole time, and I thought those guys did a really nice job today. Darius and Tony, I think this was a big day for them, and I think they rose to the occasion. That's my opinion. I thought TJ Simmons moved better than he did in the fall, which is credit to him and his preparation leading up to this event.
Chris Anderson.
Coach, obviously a lot of NFL guys there today watching what's going on, but can you kind of walk us through the whole year? I mean, the NFL guys and scouts, they don't just show up today. How are they interacting with you in this program coming around, say, during a normal year and all that?
Yeah, you're asking about a normal year, not necessarily the last calendar year, Chris.
Right.
Yeah, we're open access here. They have full access. They can come to every one of our practices. We have space in the new facility that'll be dedicated just for NFL scouts. So we're an open book. We give them access. I think that's the way it should be. We talk about being players first. Well, I think you have to live that. One way we live it is to give access to not only NFL but CFL as well. That are coming in here to evaluate our guys, and so that's how we handle it. But it's a full year, and if you're a top prospect, it's probably a little bit longer. It's longer than that, maybe a 2-year process. And there's so many things that go into it, and they do. I mean, it's a $1 billion business in the NFL, and so when they're making a huge investments in people, which is their greatest resource, they're going to do every bit of research necessary. And that's something we try to educate our players on is everything you do matters. We say it to them a lot. It all matters. And people are paying attention. And so I hopefully that answered your question.
Kalen Jones from The Ringer.
Coach, you just touched on it. Obviously what the process is like during a regular year, but I guess like without the camps and without the workouts and the combine, what are your interactions like in regards to pitching your prospects to these NFL scouts and coaches in the middle of the pandemic?
Yeah, I try not to pitch them, period. Kalen, honestly, I think that there's got to be a trust factor there between the NFL front offices and our program or me individually. So we try to deliver facts, or if they ask opinion-based questions, I'll try to give fair opinions. Obviously, they ask the questions knowing that I have strong personal feelings because they played here, the West Virginia guys, or when we had the opportunity to coach them. So I think they ask those questions fully knowing that, we're going to solicit most of the time a positive answer. It's been different this year because all your interactions are either on Zoom or via telephone. So it has been different. No different from us on the flip side in recruiting perspective. I love live evaluations. Up until, this class, we've really almost every one of our decisions is based on a live evaluation, whether watching them play in person, seeing them in spring practice, or watching them in one of our own camps that we're able to host. And you not only get, the one-on-one video or whatever, but you also see how they interact with their teammates. How do they take coaching? What does their response look like? Those are all things that are really, really important. And we haven't been able to have those as college recruiters. And I think on the flip side, the NFL hasn't been able to have that. So a lot of those questions that I'm getting are questions like those that the scout would normally be able to see in person and be able to evaluate in person, where they haven't had the opportunity. The scouts or the NFL front office, they're going to watch the film. They're not necessarily care what my opinion is about the film. They're going to watch the film. They want to know the stuff that they're not seeing that's on the video.
Back to John and Tony.
I lied, Coach. I have one more. Just popped in my head. How has this been different than a normal year? And I would assume that NFL people are just eager for any information, data points they can get right now, since you played such a limited season, had such limited access.
Yeah, they want information. I think everybody wants data points. Everybody wants to be able to make comparisons. And so really through this process, I may have gotten more questions about um, teams we played, their players, maybe their top prospects than normal. And I think that's probably normal across college football because again, people are trying to get data points because they didn't have the opportunity to get into practices. Um, Now scouts were still at several games, so they were able to be at games, but just not the practice access they normally would.
Greg Hunter.
So Neal, what about specifically Darius and Tony in terms of what people ask you? I assume they're probably guys that have to play slightly different positions in the NFL than how you use them as, a nose and a mic. So is that sort of something the NFL people are trying to figure out is exactly where they can play?
No, it again, Greg, they're not the NFL personnel is not necessarily asking my thoughts on what position they can play and all those because they're generating their own thoughts and opinions based on what they need at their respective organization. Um, they're asking questions about how they handle certain things. One with Tony that we get a lot is how did he come into our program at a late date and what type of teammate was he? How did he assimilate to the group? All those are the type of questions. A lot of questions about Darius playing the bowl game. That was really a positive in the eyes of the NFL, just because that showed a strong allegiance. Something that from a teammates perspective that they respected. But as far as I think it's everybody's different. Every organization's different, but you just don't get a whole lot of football type questions because the video really speaks for itself. Or if they get live evaluations where they're at a game in person or they're here at practice, they're able to generate their own thoughts, and they know their needs a lot better than I know their needs.
Questions for Coach Brown, please use the raised hand feature. Coach, our next question comes from Cody Nesper.
Neal, I'm just wondering, in the kind of big picture sort of thing, what does, days like this and players like Tony and Darius, what does that mean for your program? Just, in terms of perception, how you're viewed nationally and things like that.
Well, we want to be known as a developmental program. So I think that, recruiting is a big piece. You want to recruit, but you better develop. And your long-term success is going to be determined by how you develop your players, in all realms. And developing professional football players is important. That's if you were to take a poll of every player in our program, one of their individual football goals is going to be to play in the National Football League. And I think one of our roles of development is give them every resource and every opportunity to be able to develop into that. And so when we have guys that get combine invites or hopefully are going to be drafted players, that's a positive reflection on them individually. I think it's a positive reflection on the development process within our program, whether it's in strength conditioning, nutrition, athletic training, on-field coaching. I think it's all, So, we want to have, our vision for this is to have packed houses for this pro day. And have multiple combine invites, to have multiple draft picks, and hopefully you continue to do that. And if you look at it, the teams that year in, year out that have, it's not the case all the time, but the guys that have high number of combine invites or high number of draft picks, those teams are usually in the mix.
Back to Greg Hunter.
So Neal, speaking of using those type of players, Troy had some really high level NFL guys. How did you guys use that in recruiting? Was it effective? I assume it was, but is that a big part of branding as you talk about it?
Yeah, there's no doubt. You want to promote guys that have done well here. I think Tavon Austin is a great example of somebody that we really promote here. He's arguably one of the most exciting college football players of all time. I would rank him extremely high. I know that was a point of discussion on Twitter not too long ago, but his highlight tape still resonates with the guys that we're recruiting now. And obviously a first round draft pick and continues to play in the National Football League. So That's an example of somebody we're here. Bruce Irvin is a guy, that we use sometimes from a transfer standpoint, of a guy that came in here and was developed and obviously left and has been extremely successful. So yeah, you want to use guys like that as an example, but in the same realm now, we also, guys that went professional in something else, we promote them too. And try to do a really good job of on the front end talking about our alumni that came through that are now extremely successful, and whether it's business, education, whatever they chose to do. So we promote it on both ends. We for sure do it. Troy, we had a really successful run there. We had at one time DeMarcus Ware and OCU Manora were right at the top of the NFL in sacks. I think we had the highest number of group of 5 NFL players there for a long time. So we definitely, it's basically we pushed at that location is you can come there and accomplish anything, regardless of the town size, level of football. You can be whoever you want to be, and so that's kind of how we push it there.
Gonzalo from No Huddle, Argentina.
Hey, Coach, how are you? I want to ask you, what do you usually advise to your players when they came through this process of being in college to the professional level? What do you advise to them?
That everything you do has got to be with a professional mindset. And so that's from how you communicate to your parents. You heard me say this earlier, it all matters, and they're judging on everything. And so you cannot give them a reason to say no. You have to give them reasons to say yes. And that's how we do it. And we also emphasize this. This isn't a deal where you get ready for the NFL in 3 months. Darius has just walked in here. I think he's coming on right after me, and he's a prime example. This isn't his NFL, his ability to play in the NFL has been multiple years in the making. It's not just something that happens in one interview with a NFL team or a pro day or in normal times a combine day. It's multiple years in the making, and so they need to start thinking about it earlier rather than later.
Okay, Coach Brown, thank you very much for your time today.
No, appreciate y'all getting on. Get out of the way for the important people now.